What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Nooners of Fire and Blood. What an exciting chapter we have this week. Chapter 12, The Heirs of the Dragon. Viserys' reign, his election, all the seeds that sowed the Dance of Dragons. It's going to be very exciting. We have Mushroom in this chapter, also Daemon, a billion dragons everywhere. But without further ado, let me introduce my panel and my good friends. Lauren, how you doing down there? From Lauren's Corner.
I'm doing absolutely bloody well dandy today. It's a really good day. I had some time out and it's been pretty good. You can find me at Lauren's Corner. I do asking questions and I will be interviewing Grey Air later tonight. 6:30 p.m. EST, I think it is, and 10:30 GMT time. And apart from that, I'm here to chill for a while.
Definitely go check that out. It's going to be exciting and you'll get to know the real gray area. It will be fun. Mackenzie L. Burns, what is going on with you today, Sasa?
Uh, well, I'm doing very well and actually just finished recording before this season 3 episode 8 Second Sons, which should probably be out after this. And yeah, preparing for episode club tomorrow, The Reigns of Casimir, aka The Red Wedding. And that's all that I got going on right now, but thank you for having me, as always.
Yeah, I feel like I just saw you. I think it was when we recorded that podcast. Also, we're dropping a BSG podcast tonight, so go check that out on the Sideline Johns. All the links should be in the descriptions, at least for the channel. So check that out. Buy Bobbi's stuff. Go like her Facebook page. My Weirwood Nook come from Bobby. Let me give a shout out to the chat real quick for Splurta. What is up, Lady Dreamfire? How are you? Drinks and those things. What is going on, Luke? And we will have some more influx today. Bobby, how's it going, my friend? Let's see if she's out there.
She'll probably pop her head in.
We'll slowly get right into it. AU Packmule will be joining us. He is in a snowstorm right now, so everybody wish him a safe trip home, and hopefully we'll see him soon. Yeah, this instantly starts off with after Aemon takes the bolt in the neck on Tarth. Viserys needs an heir. You know, he seemingly at this point hasn't had any sons. Vagon comes from the Citadel, and supposedly from him comes the recommendation to make the first of its kind Great Council of 101 AC that happens at Harrenhal, where many lords attend. I want to say it's close to 5,000 lords were there, if I'm not mistaken. It was twice as many as they were expecting. People even showed up late after it was done. It took half a year for this to happen. Uh, During this, you have Lenore Valerian, who is Rhaenys' son, and I believe he's 7 years old at the time. And you have Viserys, who is, oh goodness, is Viserys
Maybe
is,
30 something.
I'm trying to think of whose son he is, and I'm shooting a blank.
It's not. Oh, sorry.
He was Jaehaerys' great grandson. He got passed. Basically, Lenore got passed over for age and proxy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really when it was decided that a female couldn't inherit the line of kingship. Lauren, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm primogenitor. Well, as for the Great Council, you're right, it did take ages, but the majority of the council were basically being for a male to take the throne, despite the female claimants. And I think the faith had a lot to do with that as well. Personally, I think the females should have took it because, well, they had an heir there. but just to be pernickety. But I think because of the way it works, there was always going to be try and choose a male heir. Plus, you got the high towers and that are scheming and have been scheming for ages to get on the throne. So, it was going to be that one way or another.
Yeah, with that election, you're right. Otto Hightower is named Hand of the King shortly thereafter, and Alicent comes with him and stays at Jaehaerys' bedside until his death, which is another suspicious thing that happens. Kenzie?
Yeah, the death of Jaehaerys is kind of suspect, but he is, for this time, based off of our own knowledge, relatively old, and it's kind of sad though that sort of era of the Targaryens has, in a sense, ended, and what it means moving forward for the line, and especially in this later chapter, which near the very end really sets up the Greens and the Blacks and the Targaryen Civil War. It's that last bit of not almost like peace and kind of calm. It's the literal calm before the storm, because that's pretty much how the chapter ends. It's like, and the storm broke and the dragons danced or something like that at the very end. So this is really the last bit of calm. And yet, when the whole thing with trying to find the council and doing that, it's a strategic move. I'm surprised that not Jaehaerys had really thought about this very much beforehand, because we've talked in previous chapters about the King's Road and the development of the King's Road, why they didn't do it earlier. So it's another thing of why didn't they think about this beforehand. This world will cease to know or understand, but I feel like there's probably a reason why, and who knows, maybe there was conversations about what was next and potentially what happens with Jaehaerys after.
And Balon was passed over as well because Rhaenys was the eldest, was the daughter of Aemon, who was the firstborn. So the firstborn's line has the right at stake here. So, and he didn't take any sides for the longest time. I feel like he was playing the Game of Thrones this whole time. There are nods, especially that Mushroom gives, that Balon was badass at playing the Game of Thrones. A lot of moves were made, and the perfect storm seemed to happen as well, especially things in Balon's favor in the beginning.
In regards to Jaehaerys' death as well, the high tower that was next to him, and I'm saying this with quotations, they suspected that, or Jaehaerys used to think she looked and was like his daughter. I can't remember her name, the one that basically ran away to Braavos, I think it was Braavos, and became a courtesan. There's a suspect where she might have went to, I think she
Sarah
might
Targaryen.
married into the High Towers, and the High Tower that was next to Jaehaerys when he died was basically her daughter or something like that.
Well, he kind of mistook her for Sarah, even though they didn't even have the same hair color. Sarah did send her 3 sons to the Great Council of Harrenhal. She had a better claim than anyone, but she didn't take it because she had a kingdom of her own, so to speak, and that begs you to wonder what happened later. Possibly Illyria's wife comes from this scenario at some point. We may find out in Fire and Blood too, and I do think at the very least Alicent possibly had a hand in Jaehaerys' death. Now, he could have just died from old age. Plus, the love of his life had passed 3 years earlier. This just could be to cast Alicent in a bad manner. Because as we know, Rhaenyra and Daemon, who eventually become her rivals, and Rhaenyra from the start, are the winners of this. But Rhaenyra pretty much has 3 strong children who I don't think are, I mean, they're Targaryen by blood, but they're bastards for sure, because it seemed like to me Lenore had no interest in women. Um, he's a straight up Loras Tyrell, and then we had the Knight of Flowers too, right? Which is a big hint there. And then Joffrey was the Knight of Flowers' name, his beloved Joffrey. It's pretty poetic how they used that, and I think, what did the master say? I don't like fish, but when it's served to me, I eat it. Is what he said of Lenore. That he'll do his duty, and it was a marriage to try to unite the realm, but it only made room for them to sow dissension.
Just on a random thought of side note, when you were mentioning Illyrium with Patis there, if we kind of fast forward a little bit and we're thinking about primogeniture and claims, given that we think Illyrio is a Targaryen bastard, then would his claim to the throne as it is just now be better than Dany's or Jon's, if you think about it that way? Because he technically is older, even if he is a bastard.
Yeah, he would have he would be the rightful heir per descendants at that point. Ooh, that's a really good point, Lauren. Let me welcome a few people in the chat real quick. Terry T, Mandolin, uh, Jordy Jedi, let me see, Antique Gamer, and Reese O. Am I forgetting anyone that I haven't mentioned earlier? Bobby, I mentioned you. Yeah. Go ahead with that, Lauren. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, that's fine. It just came to mind there when you were talking about it, and we're always talking about primogeniture. And it would make sense as well for whatever his and Varys's plans are. Maybe he knows he doesn't have a realistic claim, or Dany is actually his with someone else. And if you go by in Deep Geek's theory that Dany was brought up in the house of the Sea Lord of Bravos, it would make a lot of sense, because that's where her memories are. They aren't in King's Landing or anything like that. Maybe she's his daughter, technically, not actually King Aerys' daughter.
Lauren, you just made me think of something. Lyanna, Lenore's sister, whom I believe Daemon married later, was betrothed to a Sea Lord of Bravos who had been exiled. That's why Corlys was stalling the marriage. And then basically Balon went and slew her suitor in single combat. This is one of these strategic things he does throughout this whole chapter. It seems like he wants to take the throne. And I just got to bring up the point when he does come back and he gives his crown as the king of the Narrow Sea back to Viserys. He does circle King's Landing 3 times on Caraxes, and Viserys never rode a dragon after Valerion. This was a veiled threat, in my opinion. Viserys, what's he going to do? Say no? Put him in chains while the dragon kills everyone? The way it's written seems to want to portray Viserys as strong and in a good light, but I feel like he had no choice but to say, okay, once he came in on the dragon like Dany in the dragon pit.
Like, there's another thought as well. I know I've totally taken this off topic, but you know how the 3 dragon eggs got stolen, and I can't remember the lassie's name because there's too many characters to remember all their names. I think somebody just asked about that. Like, I'll wing it as well, honestly. But she sold the eggs to the Sea Lord of Bravos, and they had to technically pay for them twice once Jaehaerys heard about it. You could perhaps say that he was happy to pay for them twice as long as there was a deal made about maybe a pact of marriage at some point down the line, or one that's like gives them that shot. So what if there's like multiple marriage pacts, like between like the Martells and the Sea Lord of Bravos and things like that, and basically this is a race to see who gets the throne, whose child gets on it, that type of thing. If you know what I mean. Unite all the different kind of main powers through Dany, if she is Targaryen and is part of the Sea Lord of Bravos, and then gets married into the Dornish family, and so on and so forth. Maybe they were expecting it's not Rhaegal, it's damn it, what's his name again?
What? Oh man, the series?
No.
Rhaegar.
No.
Rhaegar?
Rhaegar, yeah,
Oh,
there.
Rhaegar. Sorry.
They were expecting that marriage to fail between him and Elia, and then it go further than that. I don't know. I really am just in hypothetical terms, but that's what it seems like to me anyway. Sorry, let's go.
Well, I mean, like, we focus on these 3 eggs, which may just be them, but if I remember right from this chapter, when Balon and Lyanna get married, they flee for a while and go to Pentos, they go to Lorath, they go up the Rhoyne, I think they go to a few different places, and eventually she gives birth in Pentos in a magister's home. Also, it's mentioned, and I can't remember the exact location, that a couple of clutches of eggs were laid. So there are even more dragon eggs out there, which, I don't see Germ using a lot of dragon eggs, but I definitely see at least one more dragon coming into the books, especially after reading this. There are too many dragon eggs scattered about.
My theory would also like link in with like, why would the Sea Lord of Bravos happily sell these eggs to Illyrio Mopatis, only for Illyrio to gift them to Dany? If they've had them for like years and years and decades, that would make sense if she is part or in part a member of the Sea Lord of Bravos's family, or something like that.
It's probably,
sorry, I'm taking this off topic.
It's probably because it's her house sigil and it is her family's ancestry that it is the dragon eggs, not probably because there is the connection to the Sea Lord of Bravos and her connections to Bravos. Obviously, we don't know exactly what her life was like up until pretty much a Game of Thrones, and just before that, because it's scattered memories that she has. But the dragon eggs, I don't know, but it'd be hard pressed to then figure out then what would have happened to Rhaella and the child if that isn't Dany, that's born from Rhaella and Aerys at the end of Robert's Rebellion. So then that just calls into the question of where that child is, if that's one's dead or alive. It's like it's an idea, but I don't know, like, because then that whole thing changes a whole bunch of other storylines.
Yeah, you'd have to assume Aegon is possibly the real Aegon, but I still subscribe to that he's Illyrio's Valyrian descendant's son, possibly. But he could be a secret Blackfire as well. I think the juicy one for me is that he's Illyrio's son. That's super tinfoil, but I'm going off those Valyrian hands in a case and how much he just wants Aegon to get there. In the show and in the book, seemingly, it's hard to wonder whether Illyrio had any inkling whether these dragon eggs would hatch. Why you would give them as a gift to someone you already know is probably not going to make it and die, and you're just using as a pawn. It puts a big question in my mind and makes me wonder if they are tied in with Quaithe somehow, and Quaithe is using them as a means to an end to further Dany. That someone knows that Dany would be able to hatch these eggs. And what is up? AU Packmule made it safe in the house. How are you doing today, my friend? So glad to have you, bud.
It's been a long day. Glad that I'm here, though. Yeah, thanks for having me on, as always, and great to see you guys. And great subject this week.
Yeah, we barely touched any of it, honestly. We were like a few pages in, and it's just we go on tenfold tangent after tenfold tangent. What did you think about the election of Viserys over Lenore? The fact that Balon was passed over, and well, just kind of the whole start of the Dance of Dragons. Otto Hightower being named Hand and Alicent.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't for Corlys and his position in the previous, and that was almost identical to what we've seen with Tywin Lannister, I definitely think he was the main reason why we have this problem. His influence over Rhaenys and encouraging all of the people that are in the council already that have a sympathetic ear to her stance, and then just moving forward. It just seemed like an identical story to what we've already seen with Game of Thrones.
It is. It's a whole lot of history repeating itself. These different players. You see the downfall of the Strongs in this, and a little bit of Larys Clubfoot, who I will be comparing to Varys, kind of like a less honorable Varys, but all the same, a crazy master of whispers. Uh, Kinsey, what did you think about some of the other things we were talking about earlier? And I'm going to think of a good question and check out the chat here real quick.
Yeah, like the beginning of the chapter really is recounting life after, or what was life after Alysanne's death, and like what kind of continues up until Jaehaerys ends up dying. So it's kind of a strange thing to like figure out for them, but like how life is going to be like without such a prominent queen and all of that. And they really recount again in this chapter how many children was had and grandchildren and all of that. And with the council, like I said earlier, it did take, like we discussed, it did take a while for them to figure this out and to move forward. And I'm not surprised that Viserys was picked in a sense, because most times you have to pick the person who has the stronger claim, but also maybe potentially this, like, the person who you feel is best either fit to rule, not only mental wise but physique wise, and also is liked by the people. And even though maybe one or two of those things didn't necessarily happen with, thought that was the best option over, and gender. Sometimes you have to pick the one that's based off of gender first, even in up until current times, pretty much.
I mean, to that as well, it makes me wonder about the series and how much of a puppet he really was, because you have Vagon, who was at the Citadel, who could have been in with the Hightower somehow, who recommended all this, plus Otto becoming Hand. Then you have Alicent in the Jaehaerys' ear up until the day he passes away. What do you think about that, Lauren, and then AU, as far as this whole treachery and deceit? And is Viserys, does he make his own decisions, or is he influenced by every damn one?
Well, Viserys is really not, probably not the best. I'll put it that way. And you're following your dad, who's a really great king that everybody loves, and they expect you to be great as well. But from what I can gather, it's not that great, and he's taking a lot of leads from his small council and others around him. I think sometimes he can lead, but most of the time he chooses to be led by others. The Hightowers, as I've said, always wanted into the inner circle. They basically wanted to take the place of the Baratheons, but be more radical about it. And the Hightowers are more closely linked to the faith than pretty much anything else. And as we know, like the faith and the crown have always been at war in one way or another, whether it be a physical war or a metaphysical one or a war of words. All those things come into play. So it's no surprise. They saw an opportunity in Viserys to take some control or make him feel like he's in control and manipulate him to a certain point that they want to go to.
No, that makes total sense because you have Otto Hightower, who was in Viserys' ear this whole time, telling him how awful Daemon was, the Lord of Flea Bottom. Would you like to expand on that a little bit, AU?
As far as him being the Lord of Flea Bottom?
And just Daemon in general, we can get into him. And if you think this whole time he was just lucky in some of the breaks he got, these people dying and him marrying, or he was playing the Game of Thrones and, like me, believe everything that Mushroom says.
No, I don't think he was playing or he was lucky. I think he's just such a tribute to Maegor that he wanted to be, friendly and fun, and he was just himself. The problem is that himself is a little too unkind to one particular relative that he really needed to be kind to. And it just reminds me so much of our own family history. The whole time I was reading this chapter, it reminded me of biblical relationships, with Jacob and Esau, and just stories like that throughout the whole Bible. Over and over again, we get these firstborn intentions that aren't really the right thing to do. And over and over again, we see where the secondborn or thirdborn or whatever is the one that is actually anointed to be the leader. And in this case, I don't think it was necessarily Daemon that was anointed. It was just that he felt that he was. And so that's the way he lived his life, just like Robert did when he got to be king.
Yeah, he's a lot like Robert.
Yeah, a lot like Robert.
Can I jump in? When you were saying about
No,
not at all. Not at all.
Yeah,
says no. You too. Good to see you with a smile on your face, and you're here, and you've survived the snow. But as you were saying about the Hightower being in Viserys' ear and talking crap about is it Daemon? It's Daemon Targaryen. That is actually very similar to Mary Queen of Scots and I think it was Queen Elizabeth I, because they never actually met, even though they were, I think they were either cousins or half siblings. And Mary had the better claim than Elizabeth did. But it was more of a choice of faith because one was Protestant and one was Catholic. And England was mostly Catholic around that time. And they wanted to keep the Catholic queen on the throne. But the thrones of Scotland and England weren't united at that time. It wouldn't happen for a wee bit longer. But Elizabeth had a lot of her people around her, mostly men, telling her hideous things about the Mary Queen of Scots, even though they weren't true. They're telling that she's the queen of nothing, of a land that's not worth ruling over, that type of thing. So this is pretty much the same as that, because their father basically died with no male heir, because the male heir that was before them died pretty young. I think it was of an illness. So this ties into this very much. I think this is where George has got this from, but he's just kind of changed some of the genders a little bit. But as we know, Elizabeth gets a bit harem-scarum after a while, a bit crazy, and then with the wars that happen and the contention for the throne, eventually Mary gets captured. After Mary does a lot of dodgy things as well, I can't say that she was perfect. And even the Presbyterian or Protestant church were starting to question her a lot. So she ends up with her head chopped off, more or less. And that's the end of that, even though Elizabeth comes to regret it a little bit down the line. She had no option.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kinsey? Maybe not. Internet woes.
Hold on. Sorry. I was just like making sure, yeah. So it was Viserys had married Emma of Aranas first. And he was 26. So he was 26 when he ascended to the throne. So pretty late compared to Jaehaerys when they were like 14. When he was like 14. So it's kind of a funny thing that had happened. And they only had one child, a daughter, after several times of trying to have a child. But I do kind of see like that a little bit. I feel more of the elements of the War of the Roses and all of that stuff, like between Mary Queen of Wisconsin and Elizabeth Woodville and Mary Tudor, all of that really more or less playing out in the current sort of storyline more often, more or less in the show. But I don't know. It's like, what do I know?
We have more dissension. If I'm not mistaken, it's on the 5th anniversary of Viserys' reign when Kristen Cole is named to the King's Guard. Emma is pregnant with Rhaenyra. She later dies in pregnancy. But during this, everyone switched out. You have Lionel Strong coming in as Master of Laws. Breakbones comes in as Captain of the Gold Cloaks. And I forgot to mention, Balon is the whole reason we have the Gold Cloaks. That they even wear gold cloaks. That the captains have breastplates. He really relished in this. He loved fighting and just breaking people's bones. But that's didn't mean to say that because of breakbones. But he came in, and that seemed to be what's her name's favorite? Somebody help me with the name. Whose favorite was breakbones? Did that end up being Rhaenyra's favorite?
I was gonna say it was Rhaenyra's, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Rhaenyra's favorite. She was okay. I got it. Yeah. Viserys then named Rhaenyra as the heir after this too. So he just keeps kind of piling it on and rubbing it in. And he marries Alicent after Emma dies, and I believe it's only about 6 months after she dies when they wed. So that gets a little suspicious there, and the people start to talking. Go, hey, you, man. What do you have? I'm not setting you up well today.
No, it's okay. I'm taking it out of left field. No problem. In regards to Rhaenyra's and the Bonebreaker, or in regards to piling it on, as far as I mean, this whole thing started with what dress colors. I think is kind of ridiculous, but I mean, we're just now getting into the point where you can't even sneeze without somebody getting offended. So,
Well, I think wasn't Rhaenyra basically in love with Kristen Cole, and then if we're to believe the testimony of Mushroom by Archmaester, not going to say his name, she was turned down, ended up in the arms of Breakbones, and therefore having the 3 brown-eyed, brown-haired children, or the strong boys, as they are called. Do Do you think this happened? Or do you think she just passed on the recessive gene and it's just in her genes? I don't know. The evidence.
I just put in the chat a little while ago that they were talking about mushroom being their one true interpreter of what's going on here. But remember, we're getting George's interpretation of what Gildane thought of what mushroom said. So this is like, well, way hearsay-ish. And every single time you hear mushroom, you hear imp, dwarf, you know, studded man. He always is uncomplimentary towards him every chance he gets. So we know he's tilted. We know he's jaded. So let's just, when we hear mushroom, we can just put aside anything that's accurate, let's put it that way, of what mushroom said. Love the stories of mushroom, but you gotta take it with a grain of salt, especially from Gildane. What you don't understand is why he is so tilted against the Grand Maesters and what other Maesters say. That's the part that I really key in on, because as a former Maester or anybody that's in the club, if you will, you would think that they would be a little bit more akin to each other, and we see that in other parts of the story.
Yeah, it is odd. You see that throughout the whole book. I don't know. It seems like a big high school. They have these little, if he's not popular, if your thoughts aren't popular at the time, you're usually not looked upon well. And people do have different work ethics. And it does seem contradictive to what they present themselves as and how they are. What do you think about that, Kinsey?
Anyone?
Yeah, like most definitely. Like there's this whole thing of, oh, I like this character because of how it's portrayed in XYZ book. It's like, or especially Fire and Blood. So it's like, oh, this is one person's interpretation of what has actually happened, because obviously we don't know the other perspectives and such, or what actually happened. Like this isn't really written as a like chapter of Viserys, and like from that perspective it's presented in material. It's because it's a collection of material that was rewritten and close to be made into a book. So I don't know. And yeah, the whole fact the weddings and all of that, it's like kind of a thing that needed to happen, but it's almost just like, what, at the same time. And like people have pointed out, it's like hard to keep up with all the names and who marries who from where and all of that such. So I think we're doing pretty well. And we can also talk about too how in here where Daemon presented his concubine who was pregnant with a dragon egg, and then they're like, no. So they're very reserving in terms of the dragon eggs and who has one and how many is left. So
Missaria, I think, the white worm, she actually died pregnant on the way back. This is another thing that fueled Balon's rage, so to speak. There are a lot of things that happened to Balon where you think he could have just went ahead and took over, but he didn't, and something had to have happened. That's why I kind of lean more toward the mushroom thing, because the other stories are that Balon was teaching Rhaenyra how to have sex. It just doesn't make sense, other than maybe they did have some kind of fling is the simpler answer. That something happened, or they were caught in a weird situation where Rhaenyra, a young girl, just was trying to be made a bad decision, and before she could get turned down, Kristen Cole walks in. Because this changes everything right here as well. Balon didn't really take a side too much until then, even though he didn't was cold to Alicent and the boys. He didn't really take a side up until this point.
I think it's really good that in the book we not only got like a reading of sort from the maesters of like our narrator, our kind of person who's leading us into this, but we've also got different points of view from other people. Probably not directly the people that are of interest themselves, like the king or the Hightower or anything like that. But I think having Mushroom there as a secondary voice, her third voice, I think he discusses at some point. There's like another maester he's quoting from. But I think it's good because we're getting different points of view that make us question what's going on and are basically challenging us not to take everything we're hearing as fact or truth. But I think Mushroom has the right of it, even if his language on describing everything is very colourful. I think he knows he's seen and knows everything. He's basically a more fun Tyrion.
I've been saying Damon, right, and not Balon. I can't remember.
Semantics.
Oh my God!
Semantics.
These names.
You've been I think saying Balon when you mean Damon, but
Goodness, yes, it's Daemon Targaryen. Balon died of a burst belly. It just hit me in the head that I'm an idiot right now. But
Well,
all these names, Balon died. Yeah.
You're not
We know
not
what
an
you meant.
idiot, because people pointed out that we always either get how can we remember all their names? It's like we just fake
I'm
it
trying.
till we make.
I think
we fake
George is
it.
doing it on purpose just to fuck with us, right? So he knows there's people like going over these books and poring over them inch by inch and talking about them online, right? I think he's just messing with us, so we purposely get like totally thrown off. We're talking about one character, but we're actually saying some other character's name because they're so damn similar. Like, does he have a pot of names that he's randomly wrote out and just grabs them from the pot and just be like, oh, cool, that one's similar to that one, that'll do. I can only guess.
My
Google A
interpretation,
names.
as far as the names are concerned, is that he's trying to give us part of the history with the War of the Roses, where we literally have two colors of the same sigil, and he's trying to give us that same thing where we get name after name after name, and they're all very much what we're used to, and then he throws in a totally different character that throws us off. Like, where is this guy coming from? Because we know that we know Joffrey, and we just associate every time we hear Joffrey, the prick little kid that he is. That's who he is, right? But in this particular case, the story is much bigger than that. So he just kind of gives us those names.
Yeah, the Night of Kisses. He ended up dying, old Joffrey. And was it Daemon that killed him in that tourney? Didn't he break Bones' bones, and it was called Broken Bones thereafter?
I think so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's accurate, actually.
That caused a big uproar there, and Lenore just found him a new favorite, and Kyle Corey, I think's the name, and that comes back to bite him in the ass later. On that, he ends up killing Lenore. Could Balon have had anything to do with this, or do you think it's a lover spat, or do you have a theory that someone else wanted to take the throne at this point? Go with Lauren first because she's been so quiet.
I don't know. I don't have a theory on this at this point in time, so I'm going to politely pass this to AU because he's had not much of a word in.
The professor. Did I freeze?
No, I was trying to answer Luke in the chat, and I'm so sorry, Lauren. Lauren, I'm gonna listen to you and play off of what you said, but I think what we are, from what I understand from your point, is that we're getting a little different point of view than what the chapter is, just because of we got off a little bit on the names, but as far as Damon and Bone uh, Bonebreaker, I'm not sure the correlation there, so you'll have to refresh my memory.
Oh, at the 5th anniversary, they had a tourney, and I think it was Damon that defeated
Oh, I know what it
everyone.
was. It was
No, it
the
was. Oh,
not the
go ahead.
kisses you were talking about.
It might have been Damon or it was Kristen Cole. Ah, never mind. It was Kristen Cole. Kristen Cole killed the Night of Kisses and was pretty much Allison's champion at this. This kind of rubbed it in the face and caused that to happen more. I'm sorry. I'm misquoting here.
That's okay. You were trying to figure out whether it was intentional or whether there was a bigger conspiracy.
Well, this is the setup. You have Lenore, who wasn't interested in women, and then you have Rhaenyra, who is heir to the throne at this point, or close to it. Um, Closer than most people are. And then afterwards, Damon ends up marrying her. Do you see Damon as setting this up, or could this just have been happenstance?
Yeah, I totally thought it was happenstance because it wasn't something that he had. It wasn't alluded to that he had intended it to happen the way it did. I guess is the best way to put it from Gildane's perspective.
They did marry shortly after, and he tried to basically take the line of succession on Driftmark when Corlys Valerion fell sick as well, though. That's something you do have to factor in, that if it did happen by happenstance, he jumped on that opportunity, though. You'd have to, well, almost have to think that that happened. Unless he just fell in love a
But
bunch
wouldn't
of
you?
times. I don't know, maybe. This is a complicated world.
It is.
Oh,
It is. But I mean,
is it?
if I was in his shoes, I would have done the same thing.
Huh? I guess. I don't know, man. We don't marry our sisters down here anymore. I'm kidding. I think it's
But
still it's just his cousin. I can't
it's
remember.
You just marry your cousins, man. You marry your cousins. Actually,
or
to
your
be
aunt,
fair,
or your aunt.
that whole thing about marrying your cousins as well actually comes from mostly Scottish tradition, because back in like 1700s and before then, it was acceptable to marry a cousin so that you could keep like the clan line going and form somewhat more economical alliances with other clans in the Highlands and in the Lowlands. It was mostly a Highland thing, but it kind of carried off into the colonies, into America and stuff like that as well. So technically, at that point, marrying your cousin wasn't a bad thing. As now, obviously, because we know about the genetics and stuff like that. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, potatoes, whatever. But yeah, what's up, Ben? No, we don't. It is like third cousins, whatever. I'm not getting into this. Oh, we can get into a little more because we started getting to where they were openly not liking each other in court. You have Rhaenyra's sons, and then you have Alicent's sons. You have Aemond. Oh gosh. And then you have Aemond as Alicent's son. Then you also have Aemon the Elder. Is that right? And one more that I can't think of off the top of my head. And then Rhaenyra's sons were Jacaerys, Lucaerys, and can't remember that one either.
No, I was going to say the one that got killed. I think is the one that you're forgetting. Oh,
you had Joffrey was the other one of Rhaenyra's sons, but the one that got killed, I can't remember. Either way, he got killed. So we have the largest gathering of dragons at Driftmark, and this is when we have the incident where Aemon loses his eye, but he gains a dragon. He just jumps on Vhagar and basically takes off for a joyride and comes back. And, gets slashed in the eye. Like always happens, no big thing. This caused further dissension because the Strongs were mentioned, and this was said out loud. Hot pincers were threatened. Uh, what did you think about the largest gathering of dragons since possibly Valyria of old? Zaza.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that it's been what now, over just about 100 or so years since Aegon has went and conquered sorry, tongue tied today, conquered Westeros. So it's kind of funny to think about these are the biggest group of dragons that have been alive all together at the same time. Because when we think about the dragons, there's only about 2 or 3 alive at the time of when their riders are alive, and so on and so forth. So to have quite a few alive at the same time is kind of funny, and it comes to question, how do you feed more than 3 dragons? How is it, how does that work in terms of having enough for not only yourself and the kingdom, but for your multiples of the dragons? And as well as you can also say that it's almost a coming together too of literal dragons in terms of the Targaryens and having so many people alive at the same time, and kind of a clash as well. A clash and a clash of all of these, because there's the picture that is in Fire and Blood on page 366, because I have it brought up right now because I forgot how funny the picture is. But of the two queens and kind of just being like so disgusted about each other. It's funny.
I'm guessing Rhaenyra stabbing a carrot or something there. Yeah, and a suckling pig with an apple in his mouth. That is a really good picture. I do enjoy the pictures from this book. And we see the contention with these kids. They just hate each other. 2 of them were even brought up together to kind of, make them bond, but that didn't make them any happier, and they were sent off to Dragonstone and separated. And this is kind of when Daemon moves in, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully I'm not saying the wrong name again. But while I lose my spot about what I was talking about,
no, it seems like you are right that it is Daemon that is mentioned later on in the chapter.
Oh goodness, I hate all these names. It's killing me right here. With the dance, we saw the seeds be sown here, and Viserys seemingly keeps forgiving Daemon. Now he goes off to the Stepstones for war twice. One time just because he doesn't feel like being around, and he gets demoted from being the head of the Gold Cloaks per Otto Hightower's request. So he goes, and then Braavos actually forms an alliance with the Triarchy to fight. No, not Braavos. Dorne actually ends up fighting with them during his second exile against Daemon. And Viserys doesn't care either way. He's just like, let him play at war. I think this is one of Viserys' key mistakes. He messed up many a time, but right here is, he could have did a few things to make this right. By helping Daemon, that might have quelled a bunch of things. But what do you think, AU? Do you like how I floundered there for about 3 minutes?
Well, it's easy to do because you've got a lot going on, and it's amazing that these chapters, or this particular chapter, and the one before it, aren't broken down in a little bit more detail, because it should be like 4 chapters, because there's so much going on, and we don't know if there's a reason for it other than the fact that we have a second generation of backbiting and arguing over nothing. And it really goes back to that whole Corlys Hightower and his desire to put Rhaenys. I mean, if that would have happened 20 years ago, all this story would have been nothing, because we would have had another prince. The only problem is that with her family, you still have the girl being the oldest, and is it Lena? Lena
I
and
think it's
Lenore,
Leanna, but I'm not sure.
however you pronounce it, it's Leanno. Those two, I don't think would have made a very good um, succession to the throne. But with Corlos and Rhaenys, I think there would have been a much better transition than what we had with Viserys.
I think her
But
name's pronounced Lenore.
sure, we'll go with that.
Lenore's the dude. That's
Yeah, it's Lyanna and Leonor,
um.
or
Oh
Lyanna,
goodness.
something like that. Anyways, you know what I'm saying. You've got those two.
Damon
Even though
ends
the
up
son,
marrying her though too, which is causes some more uproar. Like I had said earlier, they took off on Dragonback, and Lyanna was a dragon rider. If I think she's the one that rode Vagar. Did she not die in birth as giving birth as well? This happens like 24 times already.
that's another
Targaryens
thing
die
that
and giving
we
birth.
don't really think about until we look back on this chapter with those facts that so much happens with having children that are either dragon-like, or the mothers die. Like you said, um, things like that happen all the time in this chapter, and you just like, or what is going on? So
We have the
do you,
dragon eggs. Some
exactly,
hatch,
another
some
thing that we don't
don't.
even think. How do
Hmm.
you keep that going?
I think it goes back to two. Maybe you have to have a life given for a dragon to hatch. It'd take a lot of adding up, but there seems to be a 1-for-1 ratio here. That a child or someone dies for a dragon to be born.
It's like
Uh,
a transfer of the soul, as it was. Like, because each of Dany's dragons exhibit similarities to the people that she names them after, more or less. Viserion is basically her brother Viserys, and Rhaegal is Rhaegar, more or less reincarnate. And then you've got Drogon, who is basically Khal Drogo, and maybe Balerion reincarnated. Maybe the clutch came from Balerion. Maybe Balerion has a certain thing about him that maybe the other dragons didn't. It's blood magic in one way, you could say that, but it's also perhaps soul magic as well. Um,
yeah,
Johnny,
I
could you
think
ask everybody what they think as far as does is this the beginning of the end of the dragons because of the intermarriages not being sustained?
it could be the only way the magic works. If there's less than a certain percentage of Targaryen DNA, but the strong boys all had hatchlings, and I don't know if they all made it to be riders, but they did all have dragons. Uh, it is really hard to say with the blood magic. I think it may be something that they forgot long ago, and it got diluted to where they think they have to intermarry. But maybe it's just you need to have Valyrian blood, need to breed with someone else that has Valyrian blood, not so much your own family. But it's still hard to find that. You have the Valyrians of Driftmark and uh, somewhere else. Is it Crack Claw Owl? That maybe, yeah, just a few Valyrian descendants, but they're lower echelon. And you have Aenys the Exile coming here. He could have been a crazy dude with some kind of, weird cult type thing where he just wanted to marry his daughters. The whole Craster thing could have happened kind of near Dragonstone, with it being enacted by someone who was in power over a small group of people in a desperate situation, too. You have the end of the world coming, so to speak, but they may have just used that as, I don't know. I feel like that may be a lie, because Aenar the Exile, I think they just exiled his ass, and he used that to make himself look better. Anybody have any thoughts? I can rant for about 30 more minutes if you need me to.
I think the dragons represent change, big change, and they always come around a time of great upheaval or metamorphosis or change. As for the lineage of the whole, how it works for the Targaryens to have a healthy dragon, or for a dragon to be made, yeah, I think there's some blood magic in there, or some type of magic. But as for them to be interbreeding with each other, I don't actually think that's completely necessary. Especially if you go for the genetics. I think it'd be better if they had mixed blood with a family that they know has some sort of magical property to it, something that's unlike anyone else. So the Starks would be a good choice for that. It would be a mingling of magics in a way, but isn't all magic just come the same kind of magic? And doesn't George make it vague that these things are connected and aren't connected? Will we see the end of dragons? I don't think so, not completely, unless Westeros and the rest of Earth, or Planetos as we know it, moves forward into a new kind of modern age, and we see the death of all magic and all magical things. But then you have to be aware of Ashai as well. They still have they still have dragons, so it wouldn't necessarily be the end of that. It might just be the end of them in Westeros. But with at least a couple of dragons on the board at the moment, it's who's to say they haven't laid a clutch of eggs somewhere and are in several places. They have been free to roam after they were taken out of the pyramid in, is it Yunkai? It's not Yunkai.
It's a marine.
Yeah, marine.
I think there may be eggs there too.
Yeah, it's a good chance. There's eggs everywhere. It's just whether you have the ability to hatch them. And Dany was willing to give up absolutely everything to just die. She knew what to do. It was a feeling in her. It was an instinct. It was an intuition. There was something there that pulled her in. Just like Jon finding Ghost.
Yeah, I mean, it's the question, right? What I'm thinking is, supposedly there were wild dragons. They found bones, but that doesn't mean they didn't have a rider or someone to hatch them. If you go with kind of what I'm thinking here, maybe their blood has something to do with why the dragons hatch. We know they need heat, but seemingly heat isn't the only thing needed when hatching these things. We have the whole soul thing, like you said. Perhaps you can be a dragon rider with a little bit of Valyrian blood, but without a almost pure Targaryen or Valyrian, you might not ever be able to hatch a dragon egg again. Just a thought. Sasa? Hey, you? Anybody want to unmute?
Yeah, it seems like that they probably did a lot of the whole Dany having a dragon thing for her storyline, but B, if there is maybe dragon eggs in the story, you'd have to assume that you'd have, like, unless it's like, say the magic in the show, at least, say the magical baby exists and they find a clutch of eggs. I don't know if this child is going to be able to hatch at least one of these dragons, because of how much it'd be, what, 3/4 Targaryen blood in like at least half, maybe, or a quarter of Stark blood. So that's Andal's first men blood, and then Valyrian blood. So it's either it can or it can't, or it's just the manipulation of the mixing of the two is like a thing to be contended by. But
Ooh, could Jon be a Varamir Six Skins, but with a dragon in the books at some point? That's an interesting. If he could, assuming he comes back in his body, and but I don't know.
But in terms of this, like in terms of Fire and Blood right now, this is really kind of the end of what we know about the main dragons that obviously have names and sort of pseudo, in a sense, personalities. And it's also the end of what was, I guess, the more peaceful of the, even though there was Magor and all of that, this is a pretty relative peaceful time, and that the fact that there's the dance coming up between the greens and the blacks, it creates this catastrophic event that changes kind of the Targaryen family up until the end of it, and then we see the after effects afterwards. So it kind of needed to happen when it does happen, which we'll talk about next episode. But this is really the end of the dragons as we knew them, and moving forward into the ones that we obviously know now, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Remind me, did the Targaryens ever marry into House Dane? Because aren't they proto-Valyrians? Like they've came from Valyria as well.
Another Rhoynar descended from Valyria, but their descendants kind of like, no, not the Rhoynar. It's just the Free Cities who claim descendants over the Valyrians, right? Yeah, I can't remember exactly.
I'm pretty sure House Dane is a set sort of Targ kind of house of Valyrian
Not
house.
Targaryen, but Valyrian.
Yeah, Valyrian house. Like, I wonder why, if there was never a marriage between Targs and Danes, like, why not?
You do have some interesting scenarios as well where you could have a Targ baby down there, but it would be a stretch at this point. But they could be hinting toward that in Fire and Blood. I see a few things that possibly could point toward that, but I'm not going to say anything for certain yet. Yeah, that's a good point. And Dorne, their whole role.
It said by Daeron II of House Targaryen. It says on Wiki of Ice and Fire that the Danes who are considered in the western Red Mountains would be considered stony Dornishmen by Daeron. So they're not really, like they're under House Martell, but there must have been maybe like one Targaryen that lent it.
Well, Luke Braxton said Diana Dane was wife of the King Maekar, the first Targaryen, which wouldn't make the first alliance.
Oh, and it says here, it says their hair is like how they describe how being Targaryen, or dark blue or purple eyes, but despite their purple eyes, according to George, the Danes are not of Valyrian descent. So there's two types of families that aren't of, or one of Valyrian descent, and it's saying that the Danes aren't, according to George. So,
Aha. See, the chat saves us all. Yeah. And yeah, that harkens back to what happened with Elia and everything there, and that makes their alliance more sense. I know that they hinted toward that before, but thank y'all for helping me out with that in the chat, helping us out with that. Lots of history.
That too, like the fact that in current storyline, how that Elia had difficult pregnancies with Rhaenys and Aegon. That's like a trait that kind of happens with a lot of the Targaryens, is having difficult pregnancies, as evident in this chapter, which can kind of be kind of bad because the Maesters did tell Rhaegar she can't have any more children. This is partly probably for the reason why he went and looked elsewhere for a wife as well. So difficult pregnancies. It's carried on until the...
And I don't know when Lena Valerian got pregnant with Damon's I can't remember if it's his son. It's his son, right? Didn't they name it?
Things.
Oh my gosh. Either way, they were pregnant. Viserys let him come back again because he thought him being a father would soften Daemon. And this is another huge mistake that happens. She ends up... Doesn't she die again later in childbirth, right? And he gets with Rhaenyra. And it seems like this whole time that he is just trying to move up in power. But you could say there's bigger leaps he could take here. I still go back. Was he just this jilted lover trying to find love the whole time? Or did he just... I wouldn't say he planned it, but I would say he took advantage of the situations that arose. What do you think about that, Lauren?
Is one way or another. But go ahead.
The way he's going about it, you do get the sense that he's like kind of hopeless. Just trying to have things his way. I don't know. He's just looking at the family tree as well. Like he's jumping all over the place and literally jumping all over the place, freezing from one place to another and clashing with his brother. Is his brother, right? I'm saying this properly. Why is it so confusing? He's... it really is frustrating, isn't it? Joy's like, yes, totally is. He's... I don't know, maybe he's trying to one up himself and like diss his brother at the same time. Like a second marriage and then all these other children and then like getting together with other members of the family that's probably not really wanted at that time.
Yeah, I almost feel like he didn't necessarily want the responsibility of rule, but wanted his heir to rule, or wanted an heir to rule. It seemed like he wanted to be one of the guys, right? That's always what he seemingly aspired to
He
be.
doesn't want to be the leader, but he wants to be the guy behind the leader. He wants to be the hand of the king. Again, and maybe this would flow back into my theory about Illyrio as well. Not actually wanting to be king because he has a claim if he is a Targaryen or some sort of bastard Targaryen, but we'd rather put Dany forward because it's his choice. He was going to go with Viserys, and then that went tits up, literally. So he's putting her forward so he can be in the background with Varys doing the things in the back. It's very possible that Daemon's doing the same thing, or trying to, and not really getting anywhere very fast.
Does seem to be spinning his wheels. Maybe he's just a hopeless romantic, you know. If you're 30 and you marry a 16-year-old.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I wouldn't really call that romantic. I would call it like you're desperate, you've got some issues, and you don't think that anyone around your own age will take you seriously because they know too well. So you're going to go for someone younger that you can manipulate, that you can sway their ideals, and who isn't fully matured yet.
Yeah, he's like the politician that everyone loves, but because of his past, he can't run for president or the leader of the country, so to speak. He hung out on the street of silk forever, and like I said, he took to bride a hooker. You know, he pulled a Tyrion, which ended up tragically. It seemed like they were in love, but she was probably playing him for a fool. She did end up dying. Uh, this does, uh, yeah, he seems to have the worst luck, but the best luck at the same time. This man gets no middle ground. He's either having all of everyone he loves around him die, or he's just, oh, look, happily getting married, or someone happens to die for him to fit in this spot. So
He's no Podrick Payne.
just a hopeless romantic. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he seems like one of those typical people you see on Facebook posting, trying to post all the happy shit that they've got going on in their life, right? But really, in real life, it's all terrible, and they're suffering, and they're grasping at straws.
Yeah, it's a good portrayal of someone with talent that squandered it. That just squandered their talent. Makes me think of myself, and I just want to go cry.
Oh no, don't do that. We need you on the stream. But
Sorry for
Negative Nancy. Oh, his negativity.
the computer's like, yeah, your computer was like, no, you're not allowed to be negative today. Yeah, it most definitely seems that there's like something going on, and the fact that this is really what set up what happens next is like, so if this like, it's weird because it's like, if this hadn't happened, then all of these other things wouldn't have happened, or all of these people wouldn't have been in charge or ruled. So the fact that Daemon is the way that he is in terms of not wanting himself on the throne, but wanting someone of his kind, like of his own blood, not like his brother's blood or such, on the throne, is kind of funny because we haven't really seen someone sort of abdicate for the throne, but want to have their own like child necessarily on the throne like much in this story. So it'd be fun to kind of see how that plays out, even though we get the Dance of the Dragons start next episode. What am I thinking? Next chapter, or technically next episode of Nooners of Ice, Nooners of Fire and Blood.
So. We did a podcast. I did 2 podcasts before this. I have a slight excuse for my scatterbrain, but we all do a bunch of stuff. We did a episode club as well. So yeah, pass the shots to everyone. Thank you, Lauren. I'm gonna take mine now. You know, also you have Aegon the Elder and Aegon the Younger. Who was it? Yeah, Rhaenyra, the son with Daemon, right? She names Aegon when there already is an Aegon, so Jerem's just killing us there again. Go ahead, Lauren.
Sorry, I was distracted. What was the question?
Oh, it wasn't a question. I saw you unmute to go ahead and talk. Well, I was just talking about how Daemon named his son Aegon after, ended up being Aegon the Younger, and there was already the Aegon the Elder from Alicent and Viserys.
Well, I don't know. It's a slight. It's him swinging his balls around. This is a really frustrating family. Like, can you not get over yourself? I don't know. I think he's wanting to have the Aegon name be associated with him and greatness. So if the other Aegon dies, that Aegon that's connected to him will somehow up his goodwill with the people, his infamy, his fame, his deeds. I don't know. I'm not in the head of these people. They name and name and name and name. Like, how many Aegons is there? how many Viserys, Jaehaerys, Daemon is like? I'm just
Jaehaerys and Jaehaera.
The twins, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, who were born in this chapter. But now I think with John, that makes it 6 Aegons or 7. It's either 6 or 7 Aegons.
Well, there's 2 just with Rhaegar's kids, so.
Yeah. So
It'll be the battle of the Aegons. Egg fight.
hashtag, yeah.
Egg fight.
Hashtag egg fight. Get it in the chat right now. You heard this first here. Hashtag battle of the
Hashtag
Aegons.
nude and spadered as well.
Golden 66 too.
Boob glasses and all that.
Hashtag boob glasses. Hashtag boob glasses. Hashtag fluffy kilts. No, fluffy haggis. That was it.
Oh my goodness. So, AU, did you finish digging yourself out of the snow? And do you have anything you'd like to bring up from this chapter as well? Give you a little
Where do
floor
you
time.
start? Oh my gosh, that's a loaded question. For me, it was just a really great read, and I really enjoyed the creativity that George puts into this. And if I haven't said it before, I'll say it again. Winds is done, and this is proof. I mean, this is just absolutely. What are we at? 700 pages in this book, and the details are just amazing. So I really have enjoyed it, and I'm glad that he wrote it in addition to the world, because it's just a huge amount of material that was in his brain just ready to come out. So I'm glad he was able to do that.
It didn't Viserys slip and cut his hand on the
Yes.
throne, having
Right.
to have his fingers amputated? He never set the throne again, and he just had a slightly slow demise that was really sad in the end of this chapter. Would you like to touch on that? Any of the panel, or you, if you'd like to.
Well, I just know that it's another bone of contention with the ruling. You okay? Oh, the way you were looking at it was like something was wrong.
Oh, I was reading something. Sorry.
Right.
Concentration
Okay.
phase.
No, it was just the fact that concentration. There's another hashtag for you.
Freezing.
So I just think it was just another bone of contention. Here you've got the king, the maester who is on staff does one thing. The people that are in charge think it's totally wrong and should have been done differently. And turns out he ends up dying anyways. So it's just another wedge. I think is really all it depends on. I don't want to say depends on, but it's just a way of showing that there's more ambiguity between the two.
Yeah, to your point earlier as well about how they talk about certain maesters, and it seems as if they have cliques. It does seem that way the more I look on it. Given with this, you have the two very different techniques that I'm sure each one of them thought their technique was the best. And it's still argued about with Viserys' wife up into this about Alicent at this point, whether or not they should have even been amputated. And you could argue that his death maybe wasn't natural, but to me, all signs point to natural. Everything he was experiencing, just, high blood pressure, all that good stuff he had led, to his demise. And I'd say he kind of passed away in the same way that he lived. He was just along for the ride. Made decisions when it suited him. And it's sad and poetic. And one of the last things he said was that Jaehaerys or Jake would sit on this sit on the Iron Throne, which is another statement and slap in the face of a bunch of people. He just did not have a knack for choosing folks. That is odd how he has these favorites as far as grandchildren and children go. Kenzie?
Yeah, most definitely. Like the end of this chapter is kind of like sad, but then also it's like you, with like basically leaving the realm and the perspective of the dance is gonna happen. So it's like a bittersweet thing, but then it's also like the why, because like the last few sentences is talking about how Helen had brought the children that she had into the room, with being Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, and the Maelor brought them into the chamber, and basically later on in it says that he died peacefully. He closed his eyes and never went to sleep. He was 52 years old, and then the storm broke and the dragons danced. So this is a very poignant thing that we can bring up. It's just the whole fact of all of this is happening, and then this calm, and then the complete storm is just about to show up.
Would you say he woke up dead, Kenzie?
Maybe. Yeah. Never woke up. My God. But as I tried to remember how many pages was in here, I flipped, and we do have the Targaryen family tree. So if we can always refer back to that, like who is with who, at the end of this, at the back of the book. So.
But they're all the same names.
Yeah. No, but it tells you like who, by like a legend at the top of like who marries into who and such. We're near the end of that version of the family tree.
We would be looking at the book the whole time, probably. We'll just bounce these names around off. It's fun anyway. It's like musical chairs with names. People may or may not know who we're talking about. You get it. I'm just kidding.
If you read the chapter, you.
So I know what you think about Mushroom's testimony, and it does make sense. But he does put a disclaimer on it. And to me, I don't know how much it's manipulated. It might be slightly exaggerated, but it seems that some of the other Maester's accounts are more exaggerated than Mushroom's accounts a lot of times. It goes back to your whole thing about the separate factions of gray rats. And then you also think about Marlin, who's basically separated and has his own little small faction. Makes you wonder how many factions are at the Citadel. And while I ramble, would you like to say anything, AU? I'm messing with you.
You're always catching me when I'm trying to respond to somebody. That's so funny. But you're right.
I swear I'm not like creepily watching you through a security camera in the corner. I promise. Kenzie, is there anything you noticed in the book that you would like to bring up?
Yeah, it's kind of this chapter, it has like a lot of information, but it's almost like the buffer chapter after the last chapter being basically where a lot of Jaehaerys' stuff had nearly ended, because in this chapter it's more or less just him like his final steps until obviously he ends up dying. So this is like really a big buffer chapter, but it's a really good chapter, and it's weird to think, like, I can't remember why they came up with the greens and the blacks. I know it'll probably be explained because they mentioned green and black in this chapter, and I can't remember why they chose those colors when they're not typically the Targaryen colors.
Rhaenys wore at a feast the black and red gown, colors of the Targaryens, but the queen, I forget who it was, actually wore a green dress.
Yeah,
so
Alicent.
Yeah, I think it was Alicent. Oh, was it Alicent? Yeah, you're probably right. I don't remember, but I knew it was an A name. But anyways, that's how this whole thing started. Just this little tit for tat stuff.
Yeah, that
Um,
No pun
stepmother and
intended.
daughter relationship is what really made the contention because he decided to go over his first wife's daughter, the true born heir, over the male heir, which completely goes against the I mean, he just threw stuff up in odds at this point, and that's kind of where we're left right here. Also, after the whole incident with Aemon and the Strong Boys, Harrenhal had a mysterious fire, and all the Strongs except Larys Clubfoot were dead. Do you think Viserys did it? Do you think Otto Hightower had something to do with it? Do y'all have any theories on that? On the fire at Harrenhal, while I stump you. Could have been Larys Clubfoot himself in order to seek power. He has this prestigious rise throughout the next few chapters, um, where he is a badass master of whispers.
it kind of seems like that there would be just, or that someone like him would make like a spectacle, I guess you could say, about that, just to kind of create suspicion, but not about him, and just kind of blame it on somebody else. Because as we know, Masters of Whispers pretty much do anything possible to keep the realm in order. So I wouldn't be surprised setting Harrenhal on, or being one of the people to say to set Harrenhal on fire. Would be like, I wouldn't put it past what I'm saying, like, because we know what they do and all that stuff. But who knows? Maybe somebody else did, and this is just a wrong thought or a weird thought. What do you think?
I could Viserys have done it? I think more. You know, you could have had Viserys do it. You could have had maybe even Daemon or Rhaenyra having something to do with this. It's hard to know. Could have just been a fire that killed him. Harrenhal has seen many tragedies, and it doesn't have to be caused by a person. Later on throughout these chapters, I do feel more and more like it's Larys Clubfoot, though. Uh, for reasons that are evading me right now. He had some
You just like saying his
issues
name.
with his family. Yeah, I don't know. He aspired to be many different things. He had these delusions of grandeur, which he almost accomplished everything he set out to do. So I wouldn't put it past him, especially to start causing dissent, just like Varys does with causing different factions to dislike each other and playing both sides. I see that happening here with Larys. But also, you could have just had him be killed by Viserys or Rhaenyra for the simple fact you don't want people talking about, hey, that's the real father of the Targaryen kids or the Valerian kids. So that's my thoughts on it while I ramble about nothingness.
One thing for sure is I can't blame Aemon for getting the hell out of town after reading this chapter, because I'm like, why would you want to be part of this story? Just, I mean, why is everybody so excited about the throne? It just doesn't make any sense. It just creates a lot of problems.
No one has a good time on it. Even if you are a good ruler, you don't seem to have a good time on the throne. Lauren, you back yet? Making bold statements here. Go ahead, Kenzie.
Yeah, like yeah, like Tay's point. You can really see why Aemon was like, I'm done. Like, I'm tapped out. Like, no, like, especially with the whole uh, within this chapter of skipping over a child for a stepchild in a sense, or a stepmother in a sense, like how that the family decided, or that it was decided that it'd be the other way. It's kind of just a thing you're like, okay, but it would have been an interesting take a shot storyline in terms of what would have happened if Aemon was king. Like how different this whole realm at that point would have been. Would it be more peaceful because we know Aemon is one of the most peaceful people that we know in the current storyline up until his death and so on and so forth. So it would have been cool to see it, but then we wouldn't have the story that we do. Oh. What do you think, Johnny, about if Aemon was to sit the throne in the later chapters?
He was really, really hot-headed. I don't, it would have been a tedious rule, but I think he would have been very stern. But he may have been slightly too hot-headed. We see what happens with the battle over the God's Eye later. Uh, and also what happened at Storm's End with Jacaerys. No, it's just at Storm's End. It's not at no, it's at both, right? God, I'm getting conflated here, but yes, um, it's Tessarion who kills at Storm's End, right? Or is it Moondancer? Can't remember. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. School me, Milt. I see you there. um, I don't know. I don't know how good of a king he would have been. He would have been better than Maegor, I guess, but I feel like Maegor's buffed up to be super bad, so it's hard to tell.
That's setting the bar pretty low, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he was really hot-headed. I don't know if he had the temperament to do it. Daemon would have been really good at it. He just didn't seemingly want it. He didn't have the gumption to stoop low enough to take it. Stooped pretty low, but not low enough.
Can I ask a question? If this goes for the whole panel, if anybody was to have a succession issue like this, how would you resolve it? I mean, we see where they have the Council of 101, Aemon's decision in 92. I mean, would you just like all of the children, stepsons or whatever, bastards, put their name in a hat and pull one out? Or, I mean, how would you resolve this issue? Is it the oldest?
Ah. See, it would be too complicated the way I would want to do it. You'd need some type of, I don't know. That's a horrible task to have to try to undertake and choosing. I know I would lean possibly more towards tradition as to not upset the majority of people, but I don't think that would make my whole decision. And that's just in this scenario because this is such a rough and brutal scenario. You make one wrong choice here, you're dead. Um, oof. Yeah, I don't know. That's tough. Kenzie, what do you think?
Probably,
Good question at you.
Yeah, probably more along the lines of, probably more along the lines of what once was. So pretty much, yeah, like kind of a modification of what they're currently going with, which is like the oldest and then down and then over and then down and then over and then down. But if you bring in like as we see like a stepmother or such, it's not like unless there was children from that stepmother or the stepmother type of a thing, it'd be like once the, I guess, heirs line, like the immediate heirs line is finished, and then you would probably do that because it's still then technically the child, like a child blood rather than like a cousin blood or something. You would do it like maybe that way and then move over like.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius makes a great point. It has to be political. If you choose someone whom the people, lords and small folks alike, don't support, there will be war, even if that person has the best claim. And we kind of see that here, and it does go back and forth. Even the person with the best claim, uh, in this instance, sometimes isn't the right one because it seems to flip flop. Viserys just cannot make up his mind. That's a really good point, Marcus. Yeah, I'd have to completely agree with that, and I definitely have to listen to my counsel because that would be a hard decision to make alone. I couldn't do it.
Did you see Luke's answer to AU? It says, kill everyone and start over again. Simplest option.
I mean, it is simple. Uh,
Well, Summerhall fixes that, doesn't it?
Think so.
Pretty much.
It pretty much does.
And Lauren's back.
Woohoo! With her final thoughts. No.
Yeah, and then because Summerhall it would be a next book, right? In Fire and Blood Part 2 or whatever.
No, Summerhall. Wait, how far?
No, it would be the next book.
It would be the next book, right? Yeah.
The question, Lauren, is how would you resolve the succession issue? It seems like every time we get a king that dies, there's too much trouble. So how would you set it up from the beginning?
I would stop the whole primogeniture thing. Like, if you've got an heir, go with that heir. Don't be a dick about it. And if you think,
who's the heir? The oldest child?
Yeah, the oldest in line. They go the line in succession. They just do it like that, despite it being a male or a female or whatever in between. But if they are proven, out with the faith, of course, to be not suitable for ruling, or if they voice that they do not want to rule, then they should be given that option and not want to rule, and it would pass to the next eldest child or heir. But as for killing them all, I heard that comment as I was coming back, and starting again, I don't think that solves anything either. There's always going to be a dissension. One person's always going to hate whoever's chosen to be on the throne at some point. It's a matter of that person who gets the throne to quell any dissension or problems that arise from that. And if they can't, then they can't move on, or get rid of the person that's causing all the shit for you, more or less. I don't know. It's not senseless. No, it is senseless the way they deal with it.
Well, we'll see what happened with Viserys. He was kind of democratically elected, right? They voted on him, the representatives, the major lords, sort of. We don't know what happened behind the doors there. There were a lot of favors given. There were open bribes. Elephants were brought with Sarah's sons brought an elephant. So it's hard to say because even when you gave them a choice, the lords, they chose Viserys and then he just screwed everything up. That didn't help anything. Choosing Viserys burned a lot of people. Maybe they were hoping for a lack of war, but it seems like a more male-oriented thing at this point. And at least that's how it's written in the story. And that's what you got to remember. All of this is a repeated history. Maybe they got the names wrong, and they're all simple names, and we'll see that in Fire Blood too. No.
A lot of the succession problems come from the faith anyway, and come from religion in Westeros and in real world as well. It's like United Kingdom's own monarchy has been constantly about religion, at least for a good century or so it was. Despite the changing of the houses and the line as it goes, faith always had a hand in it until it didn't. And it's the same with the Targs.
Well, that's only because the faith doesn't align with the selfish desires of the king.
No. And
right? I mean, am I wrong or am I?
No.
But the faith has its own agenda as well. The faith isn't just purely about faith. It's about economy and money as well. At the same time, it has its own corruption not every king's a saint. I won't say that. And not every queen's a saint either. There's proven history for that. But at some point, you have to look at the faith and go, you're up to no good. But the maesters aren't any better either. So they're all playing the game, the great Game of Thrones.
It is, and it wonders what went behind this decision to choose Viserys besides just maybe a man. Maybe they could see the dissension before this was picked. There were seeds already slightly sown back in past chapters with Jaehaerys and Alicent, and them having so many descendants, the heir and a spare. Aegon's death sent this basically into a spiral. And with that, you had people that could be representing the faith there at Harrenhal making these decisions. And sure, they put off war for now, but it only bottled it until it filled up and just turned into a powder keg, and eventually exploded, and it was far worse than it ever could have been. Yeah, and I feel like we're going to get history repeating itself on a small scale while I keep rambling and rambling. So, final thoughts, everyone, and we'll start with A.U. Packmule, a.k.a. the Professor, as dubbed by Mandolin, I believe.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was a misnomer for sure. But as far as the final thoughts on the progression of the book, I just I really don't know how to describe the conflict. I think we do like the conflict, but I think it's so overwhelming that we see the end already. So we're always pushing for that guy to just get along with their brother. Can you just send him a pie, will you? You know, have a birthday party, do something. You know, don't be like Claire says, don't be a dick about it. Just it seems like everybody's got to be fighting for that one piece, and there's no reason for it whatsoever. But I love the story.
Yeah, I mean, Damon claimed him some stepstones, you know. He was happy with that for a while anyway. Lauren, what were your final thoughts on this chapter? And I don't know. Say something crazy. Put you on the spot.
Hashtag don't be a dick about it. I mean, if you really want a throne, just make your own. Like, but then make it like where it's getting in the way of the actual throne. You know, the Targaryens are a fun bunch of family, and all their extensions and everyone playing the game. They're basically playing Monopoly at this point, and it's got to that part of the game where someone pulls a wad of cash out from nowhere and a fight ensues, and then somebody loses their nut and flips the Monopoly board over, and some hussies get thrown, some characters get thrown, and then someone stands on, like, I don't know, the spiky dog character or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, overwhelming chapter too. Yeah, yeah. AU, definitely feel you on that one. Kenzie. Muted.
Sorry. This chapter, it's a really good chapter. Like I said before, it's one of the best, not buffer chapters, but it's one of like the big good chapters that really brings us from point A to like filling in the gaps to what becomes what we'll find out next, being the Dance of Dragons. And it's even though it's has a lot of information and stuff, it's like one of those where it's a lot of detail, like, and people heavy, as evident in this live stream, in terms of like how many people are there, how many children, how many names, and like how many different versions of the same name are introduced. But it's a really good chapter, and I can't wait to figure out what happens next, even though we kind of know what happens next, but more in more detail.
Yeah, we have Aegon and Angon and Viserys and Viserys and Visera and Jaehaerys and Jaehaera and no, I'm just kidding. There are a couple of Aegons. We have the playing out of what happens after Viserys' death. It gets really intense and fun, uh, so to speak. That's a relative term. Uh, like you said, this is kind of a filler chapter, but so much happens here for you to just salivate over. So much detail back and forth. And I thoroughly enjoy this chapter, and we're getting into the meat of this whole book. Yeah, this is when it gets good. So I
Anyone
want to.
that hasn't actually heard the Audible version of this should actually go get it. And if you've ordered your book off at Amazon and you have Amazon Prime, then you'll probably be able to get the audiobook for free, which is really handy because like the audiobook is spot on. It's really entertaining and it'll keep you occupied for a good, 48 hours, something like that.
Probably something of that nature. Um, Be sure to check out everybody on the panel's channels. If y'all go ahead, plug AU's, Lauren's, and Mackenzie's channel in the chat. Lauren will be having Gray Area on later today. What time is that?
It's 6:30 EST and 11:30 GMT, which is basically UK time. It's going to be a late one for me tonight, but I hope you all join me. If you haven't already, go check out my Twitter or my channel and all that. And the interview with Greer should be good. I hope it's good, and I hope you like it.
Oh, they will. It'll be fantastic. Can't wait. And tomorrow it'll be episode club, the Reigns of Castamere. We get to talk about Kat, who we will also talk about Thursday on my birthday stream. Ding, 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 ding. Cat fight, best mother ever or worst mother ever. It's hard to believe some people pick best mother, but I'm going to be on that side for the hell of it.
One thing for sure is she is a mother.
She is a mother, and you can't take that from her. Do you got anything you would like to plug, my friend? Anything coming up?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of live streams coming up. One is Thursday afternoon. We're going to have JR on for a discussion about stormtroopers from Star Wars and how that relates to his life, some of the dissension, and things like that. So it should be fun.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. That will be a really fun chat. JR's good dude. Kenzie, I think I said where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on my channel or on Twitter and Instagram under the same handle. But soon, I don't know when, but by tonight, we will have episode 8, Second Sons of season, aka the season 3, episode 8. Dario 1.0's entrance into the show. We just recorded that earlier today, so that should be out soon. And hope you watch it and enjoy it because we get into a few different little discussions about the episode.
Awesome. Be sure to check that out. Check out the descriptions from everyone's links. Also, the Cylon Johns Battlestar Galactica spoiler-free rewatch is every Friday at 9 p.m. and a podcast with the expert John St. Baptiste will be put up today. With that, I would like to thank everyone in the chat for listening to my long-winded responses that just bounced around here and there. I appreciate y'all for coming out. Much love to everyone. And I guess, come on, let's all wave simultaneously at the chat to get AU while he's typing every damn time. Bye, everyone.
Hashtag